Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life with your host, Linda Lang.
Hi, this is Linda Lang from ThoughtChange.com. On my journey, I've always been interested in exploring different aspects of myself. There are many, many systems out there to help you do that. One of the ones that I've recently become enamored with is the gene keys. I have Mark Bentley here, a gene key ambassador, who's going to share all about this wonderful system with us.
Thank you, Linda, for having me today.
Wonderful. So, Mark, maybe you could just give us a very brief overview of the gene keys to start.
I guess one of the best ways to describe the gene keys is that it's, in a way you could say it's a synthesis of many, if not all of the greatest wisdom streams of time, which you see in all the different religions, all the different, for example, it comes from that ancient I Ching from the Chinese. There's also aspects that you will find in, the teachings of Christ, for example. There's teachings from the Kabbalah, all these different aspects of many different wisdom streams that have found their way and woven themselves together in this beautiful tapestry that we call the gene keys. And so in the gene keys, it consists of essentially, you could say, three main parts. And one is what we call the map, which is the gene keys book itself. So when you open up the Gene Keys book, you will see that it contains 64 different chapters, which reflect the 64 different codons of our DNA. And in that book, we get to understand, the survival mechanisms of our humanity deeply, and we get to understand the gift that lies inside all of those. So in a way, you could say the 64 shadows of humanity, the roles that they play in order to drive our evolution of our humanity to get to where we are today. And it helps us to unlock them, hence the gene keys. It helps us to unlock those shadow patterns in our lives so that we can really bring this higher nature of our humanity into the world. And then you have your gene keys profile, which you put in your birth date and time in, and it prints out this magical little diagram. And in that is your personal set of keys. So Richard Rudd, the creator, or he would say the first recipient of the gene keys, brought this profiling system through, and he would say that the gene key profile is like the compass that you can use with the map. So it's the compass that helps you find your personal unique way through that map of the Gene Keys book. And the third part is what you could say is the adventure, or as I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell's work, the hero's journey. And that's the part where you actually take the Gene Keys work, your profile and the map, and you actually go on an exploration using this framework in your everyday life to help bring out your full potential that's hiding in your DNA.
So it's not as simple as having a reading or getting your chart and voila, all the information is at your feet. It's a bit of an exploration.
Yeah, 100%, Linda. And I think that's one of the things that I've come to love so much about it is, we live in a very kind of, fast food type of world where, our spirituality has become very fast as well. We have access to more information, wisdom, and ancient knowledge than ever before at a click of a fingertip. But now what's happening is we're not really digesting it. We're not really absorbing it and actually turning it from a mental concept into a living embodiment. And so one of the things that I'm such an advocate and fan of the Gene Keys work is to me, it's a framework for a personal journey to become your own greatest guide rather than looking for someone else to tell you what it means. It's really a pathway to going inwards and something you can use in your everyday life to really gain that wisdom through deep embodiment as opposed to just mental noise.
So I'm curious, Mark, what brought you to the Gene Keys?
Essentially, I actually began working with a system called the Mayan dream spell. The Mayans worked a lot with time and cycles. And so that was kind of my first beginning in this kind of profiling type of work and understanding, the deeper mechanisms of spirituality, you could say. And a big part of the Mayan dream spell work and the Mayan work itself is about synchronization. It's about using these tools to synchronize with the natural patterns of life. And then what I found was, as I began to synchronize more with the natural flow of life, it then brought me along and introduced me to human design. So some of your listeners may have heard of human design before, and it's actually where the Gene Keys stems from. And the Gene Keys is a growth that has kind of evolved out of human design. And so human design is very masculine and very structure orientated, and really helped me to understand, what kind of human vehicle am I driving and how is it unique to everyone else? And so that was really empowering. But then it got me to so far. And that's when someone actually handed me the Gene Keys book one day at a retreat somewhere. And something in it actually had a little link into the Mayan dream spell work. It was a very subtle reference, a very small synchronicity that just straight away hit me directly in the heart. And from that point, I realized I was holding on to something pretty special. And I wrote to Richard Rudd and started investigating and communicating. And the deeper that I went in, the more I discovered that what I was holding was almost like the workshop manual to the matrix of reality. And as I began to find my feet in it and learn the language, it's like a light language that helps to really clean communication. It really showed itself as a powerful mechanism to improve my life, to help me live well, to help me be a better father for my son, and to be a better person in general for my family and my community. And so that's where I then committed to becoming the ambassador.
So it has blessed you in many ways.
In so many ways.
And you're still learning.
It really is a case of the deeper I go, the more I discover, and yeah, there's this magical thing that happens with the Gene Keys work, is that it really empowers you to fully immerse yourself into the human experience. Unlike a lot of spiritual practices that can kind of be about pulling away from the human experience and kind of going through a certain journey or through ascending and leaving the planet, for me, it's really helped me to go deeper into being more and more human and unleashing the potential of what that is. And so every day, the Gene Keys just opens up a new secret, a new bit of magic. Yeah.
I think for me, what it's doing is actually helping me bring my spirituality and embody it. It is very interesting. It's esoteric and not at the same time. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how a person might work with it if they're called to.
100%. And I'd like to really, for what you're saying there about it, being esoteric and not, that is something that I think is really called to me strongly, because I do have a strong love for the real world out there. I used to work out in the mine sites here in Australia, which, they cop a bad rap and they do a fair bit of damage to the planet and the rest. But I found there was this raw honesty with the people that were there, and that everything is spiritual in all of its ways. And so what I love about the Gene Keys is that its language is more emotional in some ways. It's more about the different states of humanity. We use words like conflict and peace and diplomacy, to describe a Gene Key, and those are things that I think everyone can use in their life through self-reflection without needing to believe in anything. And so first and foremost, I would love to put forward to anyone considering using the Gene Keys is that there is no belief system in the Gene Keys. You don't need to believe in anything. You don't have to subscribe to a certain pathway. And if you are drawn to work with this transmission, then the first place to begin is, in a way, to download your personal profile. And once you get your personal Gene Keys profile, which is absolutely free on the main Gene Keys website, then you have yourself a little compass that you can have a look at. And just straight away, the first thing that I recommend doing is just look at the words and see how they feel. And for some people, it's very abstract. They don't know where to begin. Their brain gets too involved. And so then the next place would be to get the Gene Keys book and start reading about your Gene Keys. And then what happens is, as you go through a specific Gene Key and you begin to do what we call contemplation, which is to take a little bit of information about your profile and then just hold on to it through the week. Don't rush to try and understand everything, but just hold these keywords, because that's what the Gene Keys are. They're keys that when you just take these little bits of information and then go into your busy life go into the workplace that you might be uncomfortable in, or a relationship where you're uncomfortable. And then what happens is this magic between the understanding of your gene key begins to show itself in your human experiences, in your everyday practice of life, hence the embodiment aspect. And if you really feel drawn and you want to go on the adventure, then Richard Rudd has created an online Golden Path program. And, you know, some people just kind of grab the book and the profile and they find their own way. Whereas I am a massive advocate for doing the online course. He's made it very affordable. And that way you've got kind of a healthy structure that can hold you and guide you gently into the profile without feeling overwhelmed. And then as you find your footing, you know, I do then encourage to trust in the synchronicity.
Now, it looks very abstract. So if you don't know anything about it and you see your chart, you're like, what the heck is this, right? It looks a little bit like a Christmas tree with balls. And each key has 3 words: the shadow, the gift, and the city.
So this is what we refer to as the frequency band of a gene key. And so when we look at the gene keys, there's 64 different keys, and each of them has a shadow, a gift, and a city. And the shadow is, in a sense, the lowest frequency of that aspect of our DNA. And another way I like to look at it is the gene keys is essentially the programming language of our DNA that helps, you know, kind of define who we are. And I do believe that one day scientifically we're going to see this link happening. And so in that aspect, the shadow nature of a gene key is kind of, it's its fear frequency, where when we're existing in fear, the shadow frequency of that key will begin to show itself in your life. And the original function, from my perspective, of the shadow nature of a gene key was survival. You know, it was, for example, if you see, you know, we mentioned conflict earlier. Conflict is the 6th gene key. So if you want to learn about conflict and what the purpose of conflict is and what its highest nature is, then you open the Gene Keys book and you explore the 6th gene key. And conflict was important when we were cavemen, cave women, way back before we had this emotional awareness and we were just, you know, more simple human forms. And that conflict or greed or dishonesty, whatever the shadow frequency is in that word, in that key, helped keep us alive in the early days while the human form was still kind of getting traction. But now that we're where we are now in our modern day, we actually are running a lot of these survival mechanisms. These shadow frequencies are still being used and operated, even though we're not actually in as much danger as we think we are. So what's happening is people are still triggering their shadows in their profiles when they get an unpaid bill, for example, and they start stressing out, or maybe someone didn't like their Facebook page or post, and suddenly it triggers this fear and this fear response. And so as we begin to understand the shadow frequency, we begin to discover that there's actually a gift hiding inside that shadow. So for example, within the shadow of conflict lies the gift of diplomacy. So in order to really become an expert in diplomacy, you have to have walked into conflict. You have to have experienced conflict, understood what is the basis of conflict. How does it get created? And as you experience the shadow, you can then begin to go, bring awareness to the process and elevate that frequency and start bringing and sharing the gift of that shadow, which is diplomacy, into the world. So the gift frequencies are, you know, these essences that we're here to bring into the world and that help us transmute the shadow. And then the citic nature is kind of the highest part of the frequency band of our DNA, in a sense. And you could say that the cities represent our superpowers. So if like in all the movies that we love so much of superheroes, the cities in your profile are the superpowers that are latent, waiting in your DNA to be awoken. And it's through the pathway of the gift that we set these superpowers free, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's the full gamut. Love and fear on the same energy wave, just different ends of the stick. So I think it's a really powerful thing to do is to explore the shadow, because chances are you don't even recognize when it pops up in your life. And so when you can read about it and reflect a little bit, then you have more self-awareness. And the next time you step into that frequency, you have more choice.
Mm. Amen to that. Yeah.
Now, there's a number of, I don't have my chart in front of me, but there's a number of gene keys in a person's chart, and they talk about your life work, what keeps you healthy, your purpose. Maybe just give us a brief overview of all the goodies in a person's chart, Mark.
For sure, for sure. And in a way it's a treasure map. You know, your profile really is a treasure map. And when you learn to read that map, you know, it's like, I can tell you the experiences I've had in my life are incredible. So in a way, you can break down a profile, because when you first download it, it does look complicated. Like you say, it's all this all in one piece. They used to have it in 3 separate sections. But now the new profiling system, you can flick on and off switches to simplify it. But most people would just download the full thing. But when you look at a profile, it's split up into 3 sequences. And we call them sequences because it's designed to be contemplated in a specific order. And so when you contemplate your profile over time in a specific order, it's like cracking a safe. And, you know, each sphere, so you begin with your life's work and you work your way into your body. And so the idea is that as you're contemplating, you get these little breakthroughs, these little aha moments. And I always think of a safe cracker, you know, in the old movies where they used to have their little headset on and they'd be listening to the safe, turning the dial, and hear the click, and they know they've found a number. To me, that's the process of the Gene Keys contemplation of your profile. Is it showing you the cheat mechanism on how to do it, you know, efficiently? And so it's made up of 3 of these sequences. And there's more to come, actually. But these are the 3 core ones that will be necessary before anything else. And so the first sequence is called the activation sequence. So it's the one built of green spheres in your profile, so the green circles. The activation sequence is all about your body. It's all about really getting your spirit into your body and what function it has in the world. So it deals with things like your life's work. You know, what is it that evolves your life's work and challenges it? You know, it looks at, you know, the more unconscious, subconscious kind of states of who you're here to be, which is your life's purpose, and, you know, how to stabilize that essence. So the activation sequence is really important. You know, it doesn't always seem the most glamorous once you look at the rest of the things, but without the activation, you won't have core stability in your physical vessel to be able to handle the higher frequencies that you go on to explore. And so that's where the activation sequence comes first. And then we move from there into the red circles, and that's what we call the Venus sequence. And so the Venus sequence is all about relationships. And so one of the premises of the Gene Keys is that our purpose in life is evolved through our relationships, whether that's relationships with lovers, with family, with in a workplace, in society, but it's also relationships with animals, with nature. How do we interact energetically with the world around us? And so the Venus sequence is where the real juice sits in the Gene Keys profile. It's where the real potential for transformation lies. And just as you were mentioning before, when you go into there, you begin to discover your triggers, and you'll begin to discover these hidden patterns that you may not have noticed that have been creating turbulence in your life, in your relationships and around you. You can look at how are you participating in the creation of the things that you don't want. You know, it has all these really juicy things. And it's a really potent part of the transmission. And it's one that never ends in a way. I go through the whole thing, but I'm always coming back into that Venus, into that center, and extracting more and more. And as a byproduct, you know, just as a personal kind of story, what I went through the Venus was everyone would say, Mark, you're such a happy, loving, sweet, nice guy, you know, my whole life. And what I realized, you know, because in my relationships, my ex-partner, my son's mother, was the one that kind of I had my greatest transformation around. But it really helped me to see where I was playing these hidden cards to manipulate the situation and looking like the nice guy. And that wasn't serving me, because in the end, it may have kept me safe, but it wasn't helping me deepen my relationships. It was keeping me isolated and cold and away from the beauty of connection. So that's the beauty of the Venus sequence.
It wasn't helping you evolve.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what relationships are here to do, is whenever we're challenged, is that there's something inside that we can work through to grow. And so once we move through the Venus sequence and we begin to get a feel for that emotional pattern of ours and our defense mechanisms, and we begin to wake up that inner child and that sweet innocence inside us, and we begin to trust, because that's really what the Gene Keys helps you do. It helps you to begin to trust deeply in life itself so that we can just lean into it. And then as you begin to lean into it, it then enters the third sequence. And the third sequence is known as the Pearl sequence. And the Pearl sequence is all about how you're designed to prosper in life. So that's when we start looking at the mental realm. So if the activation is the physical, the Venus sequence is the emotional, the Pearl is the mental side of the process. And what it's saying is, okay, now we're grounded in the body. Now we're relating and communicating. We're open-hearted. We're starting to move forwards. Now let's prosper. Now let's begin to share our gift into the world. Let's begin to really share and thrive. And so when we start working with the Pearl, we start really unlocking synchronicity. We start unlocking the magic of reality. And that's, it looks at things like the sphere of culture, which in your sphere of culture is a gene key in a line that helps you to unlock and understand how you're best designed to work. Are you best designed solo as an entrepreneur? Are you designed to work in small teams, maybe of 3 to 15 people? Are you designed to work on a more collective level? So it really helps us to find our place in the cosmic story in that sense.
Fascinating. And when you do get your chart on the Gene Keys website, it gives you a little printout of information on the 4 physical keys. And I pass it along to a couple of my friends, and they're like, oh my God, this is so you, Linda. So sometimes even you might not recognize all of the aspects that are in there, and yet someone else might totally see that as you.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward at growing into this, beautiful blueprint that I am wired for.
And I think that's such a magical thing, right? When you can begin to have a taste of your potential, of who you are here to be. And I think one of the things I think so many of us share on this planet is this lack of belief in ourselves, when we're first really walking out there in the world. It's so much easier, like you say, to see the gift in everyone else. One of the things that you'll probably notice when people first come into their profile is that they recognize the shadow frequencies much quicker. They recognize the negative things of their profile very quickly, and they're very quick to own them or not. But it is the gift frequency which can be more challenging to recognize in ourselves. And it's such a powerful thing. One of the analogies that we often use with the Gene Keys is of like a rose bush. And in a way, the Gene Keys profile helps give you a trellis to help your rose bush grow, to help give it some framework and structure and support while you're finding yourself. And in that analogy, the shadow frequencies, those dark words that feel really gritty and uncomfortable, they're the manure of our rose garden, and no one really likes working with manure unless you're an avid gardener. Because if you're an avid gardener, then you love manure, because you know that you're putting around your rose bushes is serving a purpose that is giving juice to the plant. It's what's going to give that delicious smell when the time comes. And so they're willing to do the work with the manure because they know what the scent is that's coming. And so in a way, just as you're sharing, that's what the Gene Keys has done for so many, is it's helped us to become avid gardeners of our inner world, and has helped us to own our shadows instead of trying to get rid of them, and to work them into the roots of our being so that we can actually grow into the roses that we came here to be.
Well, Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today. Would you like to share your contact information or your website?
Actually, website is just going up right now. So people can go to www.markbentley.com.au, and that will be fresh and shiny. Otherwise, I'm pretty active on Facebook as well. You can find me at facebook.com/MarkBentley199. And I often share videos there.
Okay, we will put the links in the show notes as well as the Gene Key site so people can get their profiles done. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Exploring the Mystical Side of Life. You will find us on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Anchor.fm, and on Podcoin, the platform that gives you points for listening to your favorite podcasts. Come and visit me at thoughtchange.com. Pick up your copy of Learning to Listen, and I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.